Last week, Bill Belichick didn't get enough votes to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. His owner in New England all those years, Robert Kraft, according to multiple sources, is not getting into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in this particular year. Darren Peterson was incredible in college basketball last night at the end. And it's Super Bowl week and day one of Super Bowl trivia later on in the show. A guest-heavy show where we're going to have Aaron Schatz, the DVOA creator, on at 11. I think he's in San Francisco. Liam Griffin covers our team for the Washington Times. He'll join us at 11:35. And I'll play more of my conversation with Scott Turner, where he discusses Jaden Daniels versus Drake May, and tells the story that I had referenced yesterday about his personal recruitment of Stephon Diggs. But I'm going to open up with this tweet that I got that I did not see until after the show yesterday. And we did not talk about this much, I don't think, on the show yesterday. Greg in D.C. writes, Greg says, Kevin, so I assume you're in support of the Vikings firing their general manager because he took his available paternity leave a few years ago. That's usually your Neanderthal position. So what Greg is referring to, and I think we had this right before we went off the show on Friday, and even talked about Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah getting fired, the Vikings general manager. Didn't we? I'm pretty sure we talked about it for like 5 minutes. Now, we did not know what came afterwards. And man, there was a ton of reporting on this firing over the weekend. Diana Rossini had this stuff on the paternity leave that he took in 2023. More on that coming up. But there were a ton of stories on the firing of Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, the general manager in Minnesota since 2022, fired 4 years after he was hired the other day, January 30th, 2026. And some of the reporting, you could tell, man, these were hit pieces because people in that building were chomping at the bit. Maybe some people outside the building that had some dealings with him were chomping at the bit to bury this guy. Now, I kind of follow the general managers around the league, but not like, the people in their own market do. But because one of my guys, old you-know-who, as Galdi refers to him, Kirk Cousins, was quarterbacking in Minnesota, I kind of paid attention to what was going on in Minnesota. And the biggest criticism of Adolfo-Mensah was that he didn't draft well. Now, the J.J. McCarthy thing is a big deal, especially since Sam Darnold is in the Super Bowl. I have a feeling if Sam Darnold wasn't in the Super Bowl and J.J. McCarthy was just okay instead of brutally awful for much of the time that he played this year, he might actually still be here. But what I know is that his very first draft, Lewis Seen, the safety, was drafted at the end of the first round. He's barely even played. I don't even know if he's in the league anymore. And that was back in 2022. Andrew Booth was their second-round pick. Like, it was a bad draft. The first two drafts were bad. And you can start to get a handle on the 2022 draft, 2023 draft, 2024, 2025, a bit too early. But there was, that conversation that he's not very good at what he's supposed to be good at. But the stuff that came out about him over the weekend was, some stuff, man. Arif Hassan, who covers the Vikings, wrote a story that had people referring to Adolfo-Mensah as a clown, as arrogant, as the smartest guy in the room, just ask him. And really overall, and this came out in multiple stories, he was just a guy that very much was disconnected from many in the building, including those he was asked to manage. When you're in a managerial, upper management, one of the top three positions in the organization, I mean, it's, head coach, owner, head coach, general manager, and you're asked to manage a staff, and the people on the staff say that you don't really kind of manage at all. This is what people were saying about him. But what Greg, the guy who tweeted me, was really referring to was Diana Rossini had a story in The Athletic about how Adolfo Mensa took 2 weeks of paternity leave during training camp in 2023 for the birth of his first child. And there was a lot of like eye-rolling negative reaction, like, huh? Around the league. Now, she did come back later that day and say people inside the building, the Vikings ownership, etc., did not push back on him taking 2 weeks of paternity leave in in a time of year that's rather important for a GM to be around. You know, you're paring the roster from 90 down to 53. There are waiver wires, there are cuts, there are potential trades. It's one of those times of the year for the GM where, you know, they're involved, like most of the year, but really involved. Of course, the predictable kind of outrage from many people out there who said, this is, you know, a black mark on the NFL. Like the reaction from people around the NFL because he took paternity leave. Are you kidding me? Like that's why the NFL is, you know, needs help. Like this is something that all fathers should do, no matter what their job or their responsibility is. How could people be critical of somebody taking 2-week paternity leave? You know, a lot of it speaks very poorly of the NFL, that the NFL's reaction, what it was, or at least, you know, Diana's reporting. I can imagine there was a whole hell of a lot of eye rolling, not only, you know, around the league, but I'm sure inside that building, that, you know, your general manager is going to take 2 weeks of paternity leave at a rather important time of the year. Look, you know, when you're the GM of an NFL team, that's a tireless work schedule that time of year to get a roster ready for the season. You know, monitoring waiver wires for cuts and taking calls on trades, etc. Not that you couldn't do that remotely, but, you know, yeah. So, look, Greg is expecting me to have a similar take to the take that I've had in previous years whenever this has come up, typically with players, right? It's, you know, will that player actually miss that key game? I don't know that we've actually had a player miss like a massive game. Like, can you imagine if Sam Darnold said, look, there's a chance I may not be able to play on Sunday against New England in the Super Bowl. My wife's due on Sunday, February 8th. Yeah, look, there's a lot of things they could do to, you know, speed it up or slow it down or whatever. You know, here's where, you know, Greg gets into me being a Neanderthal. Look, I do believe, Greg, and I'm going to get to my real take on this because I do think there's an in-between. I think there's some nuance here. I think there's some gray here. But I do believe and have always believed that there are certain professions where some of those liberties that you get in other jobs, like, you know, spelled out vacation time, floating holidays, you know, and yes, paternity leave, just aren't very high on the list, you know, when you're discussing whether or not you're going to be employed there. Like you sit down to, you know, take an interview for one of 32 general manager jobs in the NFL, you know, I don't think the candidate typically is asking about floating holidays or how much vacation time they get. But you know, in many of those professions, it's not just pro sports. There are a lot of professions that are that way. The trade-off sometimes, not always, but the trade-off for some of that is, you know, obscene compensation, very high compensation. But for that, the quid pro quo is you have to succeed, and you probably have to succeed pretty quickly because these jobs can be very short-lived. If they don't succeed, they're very highly competitive, you know, businesses, pro sports are. It's a zero-sum game. If you're not getting ahead, someone else is taking that spot. But yeah, it's a, you know, we're gonna do whatever it takes here to be successful. And many of those jobs in pro sports, including being one of 32 general managers, also have the responsibility of others and their livelihoods, you know, the livelihoods of many in many businesses where you have, a very senior critical CEO or a critical CFO or a critical, senior VP of sales or whatever, the livelihoods of many others, that work with them or for them rely on them being available and succeeding. It's not a remote job. An NFL general manager isn't. It's not a remote job that pays commission only when you work hard and doesn't pay much when you don't. Because those jobs, others aren't losing their jobs if you're on a commission only structure. That's not what a general manager NFL job is. He's not a 9 to 5er, with 9 floating holidays and, 2 weeks of paid vacation. Now, Greg, let me give you my answer that I don't think is Neanderthal to this, because I do think that there's kind of an in-between. I also, by the way, I'll just say this. I don't think that, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah got fired specifically because he took 2 weeks of paternity leave during training camp. I think if J.J. McCarthy had lit it up last year and Sam Darnold had floundered in Seattle, I think he'd probably still be the general manager. What's interesting is the timing of the hire, didn't happen right when the season ended, a month ago for them. It kind of happened when Sam Darnold made the Super Bowl. I don't know if that's coincidence or not, but I don't think the 2 weeks of paternity leave are why Adolfo-Mensah got fired. I also think that, there's a bit of a disconnect perhaps for him, from, the actual level of sacrifice that job requires to be successful. And by the way, to be perceived in a certain way. But I do think there's a lot of middle ground in this. So let me get to that. The middle ground is this. I don't know if you heard Joe Brady last week when he got the Buffalo job. He went on and on about how, coaching's been his life and he's missed, the births of his children and he's missed birthdays and he's missed holidays and he's missed funerals, et cetera. And I think that's one extreme. And I think that certainly Adolfo-Mensah taking 2 weeks of paternity leave is the other extreme. And I don't think it has to be the extreme. In Adolfo-Mensah's case, did he really need 2 weeks of paternity leave during training camp? I mean, I got to be honest with you. I would have eye-rolled the whole situation had I been in the organization. That doesn't make any sense to me. The most important time of the year. Be there for the birth. You're the general manager. You're not required to run practices. You're not playing a game in August. Understood. Be there for the birth. Be there at night, when your wife's, but 2 weeks of being there, I would have rolled my eyes had I been in the organization. I think that's an extreme. That certainly reflects a bit of a disconnect from the kind of sacrifice that needs to be made. But in Joe Brady's case, I think that's the other extreme. A head coach can go home for a kid's birthday dinner, on a Wednesday night during the season after practice. And if there's a lot of work after practice, he can come back at midnight and work from midnight to 3 a.m. to catch up on what he missed. He can miss, a Thursday of a big game week to attend a funeral. If he's back in a few hours, he can attend his wife's birth as long as it's not during the game, because that is a big responsibility. Others' livelihoods are on the line as well. I do want to say one thing. I do make the case for the childbirth that is problematic medically. I mean, if there is going to be medical risk for the mother or the baby, that's a different conversation altogether. I'm not, generally speaking, I'm not for the missing of the birth of your child. I mean, there's a whole other conversation about whether it's overrated, underrated, whatever. It's much more important for the father to be there for the rest of the kid's life than it is on the day the kid's born, but both are important. It's fine. I'm not sitting here telling you that somebody should miss the child of their birth for extra film study, in late January when you're still months away from the NFL draft or still a month away from free agency. That's not what I'm talking about. But 2 weeks for paternity leave in the midst of training camp, you're giving your employer and many around that employer, you're giving them reason to question your sacrifice if things don't succeed. I mean, we know as NFL fans, games are played. Players and coaches and front office people, they work on Christmas. They work on Thanksgiving. They work on a lot of other important days that are personally important to them. This league is a competitive business, like a lot of businesses are. They don't stop and say, we'll wait for Kwesi to get back after 2 weeks of paternity leave. We'll put the cutting of all the players and all of those deadlines on hold. It doesn't work that way in that business. When you make $4, $5, $6 million a year as a general manager, there are often things you've got to sacrifice. These opportunities are few and far between. They are very limited, and they're fleeting. And if you don't want to sacrifice from that standpoint, and you want to have the benefits that a 9-to-5er has, find another line of work. I mean, that's just the reality of not just pro sports. There are a lot of businesses that really rely on key man or key women. There are key man insurance policies. Some of you know what that means. But when you are a key man in an organization, you're getting compensated like you are a key person, and then there are insurance policies against your death or against you or on your sickness because the business will not succeed without you in it or won't succeed at the same level without you in it. So that's the kind of responsibility you have. I know a lot of you don't understand that, and that's fine, or disagree with that. That's probably a condescending way to put it, to say that you don't understand it. It's more of a disagreement. 2 weeks of paternity leave is excessive during training camp for a general manager of an NFL team. And it's not absurd for people in that business to roll their eyes. They understand the commitment and the sacrifices that have to be made. At the same time, Joe Brady, the head coach of Buffalo, can certainly make the childbirth of, can attend the childbirth if it's not on game day. Any other time, you can make room for that. You can make room for the funeral of a loved one, if it's not scheduled during an actual game. But key men, key women, they are insured for their presence because the business relies on those people, and other livelihoods are at stake based on their commitment and their sacrifice and them being there and performing. Thank you, though, Greg, for bringing that up. I hope that wasn't too Neanderthal. I think I split the difference there. I think Joe Brady that's Neanderthal. Like, come on, dude. It's nuanced. There's room for, it's May. The draft just ended. We're a week away from minicamp. I can go home and, spend time with my kid for his 4th birthday party. That, to me, is, a bit performative. And at the same time, what Adolfo Mensa did is a bit disconnected. All right. When we come back, I do want to talk about something that I watched last night because I talked about this player on the show yesterday, Darren Peterson. He's different, and he's probably going to be the number 1 pick. And it's very possible he could be a Washington Wizard a year from now. He put on a show at the end of a game last night that I'll talk about briefly when we return. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
Play clock at 5. Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler. Unreal.
Nearly 11 years ago to the day, Super Bowl 49, the last matchup between the Patriots and the Seahawks. And, of course, one of the more famous plays in Super Bowl history, Malcolm Butler's interception of a Russell Wilson pass on 2nd and goal at the New England 1-yard line with about 20 seconds to go in the game, a game they trailed 28-24. Just give the ball to Marshawn Lynch, Pete Carroll and company, and Seattle would have won the game. But the reason it's a what do you got today is that I saw this post from Mike Sando for the NFL. He works for the NFL Network. Somebody sent this to me and said, I know you agree with this. Mike Sando retweeted a clip of Bill Belichick. If you recall, let me set it up. So going back to that Super Bowl, it was 28-24 New England. And Seattle had driven the ball all the way down the field, and they were in good shape to take the lead very late. But New England still had 2 timeouts left, and they had Tom Brady at quarterback. So if Seattle scores, kicks the extra point 31-28, in that specific instance, and I remember talking about this the day after the Super Bowl and arguing with people about this, you want to save as much time for Brady in the event that Seattle scores. But after a 1st and 5 run, at 1st and goal run at the 5-yard line, Marshawn Lynch ran down to the 1-yard line. The play ended with a minute to go in the game. New England holding 2 timeouts. And I remember watching the game saying, what is Belichick doing? Why is he not using his timeouts? He's got to leave time for Brady to tie this thing, because it certainly looks like Seattle's going to score and take the lead. You know, that was a long drive where they had taken over at their own 20-yard line and had 2 minutes to go, and Wilson completed some passes, and he had the big pass to Jermaine Kearse for 33 yards down to the New England 10-yard line. And then, you know, here comes Marshawn Lynch, and it's 2nd and goal at the 1. And Seattle's looking around like, I can't believe they're not calling timeout. And then, of course, they made the mistake of throwing the ball on 2nd and goal at the 1. Seattle still had 1 timeout left in that situation. After the game, Bill Belichick explained it, that he noted in the moment that Seattle looked confused as to what to do. And he didn't want to let them off the hook by calling a timeout and getting more organized offensively. And I remember saying, people are lauding Bill Belichick. He baited them in to throwing an interception. I'm like, he may have baited them into being disorganized on 2nd and goal from the 1, but how could he actually have the vision of baiting them into an interception? Maybe a bad play, a disorganized play, but, you know, the idea that it would end in an interception rather than just a 3rd and goal from the 1 is absurd. So there was a lot of retweeting of Bill Belichick explaining his brilliant genius in that given moment to let the clock run, to not use his timeouts, to save for, you know, more time in the event that Seattle scored. Rather than being walked off, why not have 50 seconds to go down and get 3 to tie it and force overtime in the Super Bowl? And so there has been some retweeting this week of, you know, Belichick's genius explanation, which I always felt like was not genius, but unbelievably high risk, because maybe you duped them into running a disorganized play. But to take it a step further and think that he somehow, you know, predicted in that moment that not only was their disorganization going to lead to a bad play, it was going to lead to an interception, and a game-ending interception, is too much for me to believe. So people have been retweeting sort of Belichick's explanation of that. And, you know, Bill Simmons said, if you don't think he's a Hall of Fame first ballot, this is 300 seconds of genius. It actually isn't, in my opinion. And Mike Sando, somebody sent this to me, and he said, I know you're going to agree with this. Sando wrote, there were no obvious signs of Seattle being under stress, being disorganized. They had a timeout left. You have to call defensive timeouts there so Brady has time for rebuttal drive. Broadcast shows Pete Carroll chewing gum with 20 seconds on the play clock. Seattle aligns for a fateful play with 10 seconds on the play clock. Fateful play, 10 seconds. There was no panic. It looked routine. Al Michaels then says on the call that Seattle is bleeding the clock. Not, oh my God, Seattle's disorganized. Seattle snapped the ball with 5 seconds left on the play clock. Totally looks routine. It was a great play to save the game, but not a great decision to bank on that happening at the expense of time for Brady if it didn't work out. Of course. The play made by Malcolm Butler is a great play after a terrible play call. But the decision to bank on that happening at the expense of losing 40 seconds or 35 seconds of time for Brady to answer down 3 is absurd. It was dumb. It was really, really dumb. And he is the greatest coach that's ever lived. I mean, he absolutely should be in Hall of Fame first ballot. And he was always very good at that situational stuff. I will tell you this right now. Player who played for him, who is now coaching that team in the Super Bowl, Mike Vrabel, would have absolutely taken a timeout after Marshawn Lynch's first down run to the 1-yard line. 100%. And so would any other coach that knows what he's doing in today's game. And there were enough people back then that knew what they were doing. A lot of people that didn't. I remember just being like, I don't understand how people are falling all over themselves to give Belichick credit for duping Seattle into throwing an interception. It's fine if he felt like he saw disorganization and didn't want them to be able to substitute. And he liked the matchup for that second and goal play at the 1-yard line. And he thought he had a chance to get a stop. But predicting that what he was doing was going to lead to an interception, that's a reach. Predicting that what he's doing is going to lead to a negative play, but not a change of possession, okay. But then it's 3rd and goal, and you've just wasted 35 to 40 seconds of the clock. And if they score on 3rd and goal or 4th and goal, you're screwed. Going to walking off the field a loser with 2 timeouts in your pocket. Interesting, the revisiting of that 11 years ago. It was a hotly debated topic, but because it was Belichick, I do remember, I remember taking calls on this after that Super Bowl, and people saying, oh, you know more than Belichick. I'm like, I don't know more than Belichick, but it's just logic. Who predicts in that situation that their disorganization is going to lead to an interception? And that's what it had to lead to for him not to call a timeout. Because just a bad play doesn't make the timeout worth it if they retain possession. I'm not really that excited right now about a Seattle-New England Super Bowl. I mean, I will get there by Sunday. It's not the sexiest of matchups, is it?
It's not. And you're also, like we said yesterday, we're also not really expecting a crazy high-scoring contest, so it's just going to be a gritty, grindy football game.
We'll probably end up getting a high-scoring contest somehow.
Which is exactly why once we get to kickoff.
As we're getting closer, I really wish Matt Stafford and the Rams were in this game. I really do.
You want the star power?
Yeah, star power, but also a matchup between the 2 finalists for the MVP.
Yeah.
And Stafford had a phenomenal game against Seattle. And it was a game that I thought they were going to win. And against that defense, to throw for 831 yards in your final 2 games, 6 touchdowns, no interceptions, 1 sack. I mean, it was kind of all-time stuff. Where they failed was on some key third downs and fourth downs, obviously, that last 4th and 4. But, yeah, I think I don't mind New England being in this game. I'm a big fan of Vrabel, big fan of Vrabel. But I wish they were playing the Rams. And then we'd have man, we're getting to that point where there's a pretty good chance every year, 60 Super Bowls in, that it's going to be a rematch of a previous Super Bowl. I mean, I can't figure out the odds on that right now because it's the number of teams that have been in from each conference and et cetera. But I think still the most matchups head-to-heads, Pittsburgh and Dallas. They played each other 3 times. I think that's the most. This will be the second for Seattle and New England. And by the way, had Denver won, it would have been Seattle and Denver for a second time. That was the New York Super Bowl. And if you think it's cold around here this week, Super Bowl week in New York, which was a fun week, I'm not going to lie to you. Cooley and I had an absolute blast in New York that particular Super Bowl week, but it was frigid all week long. Yeah, I've seen the number pop to 5 in a couple of places, but still it's almost uniformly 4.5. 90% of the books have it at 4.5.
By the way, back to the rematch thing, Patriots Rams would have tied Steelers Cowboys for the record 3 times if they had played, if the Rams had moved on.
Oh, right, because the Patriots Rams played a few years ago, Sean McVay's first Super Bowl.
Yep, 2018. Everyone hated that.
3.
Yeah, everyone hated that
scoring Super Bowl ever.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So lots of so Pittsburgh Dallas is the only matchup that's happened 3 times.
Correct. Yeah.
Washington Miami's happened twice. And a lot of, twice.
Niners Bengals, Bills Cowboys, Patriots Rams, Patriots Giants, Patriots Eagles, and Chiefs Niners.
Patriots Eagles, right? 2004 and the Nick Foles Super Bowl that
Philly.
Won. Yeah. I mean, look, in an era of NFL football that is supposed to prevent dynasties, we've had a lot of New England and a lot of Kansas City for this century. And so, the idea of, I guess that probably increases the opportunity for rematches. All right. Plenty of time rest of the week to talk Super Bowl. We'll do that with Aaron Schatz at 11. We'll do it with, you'll get Scott Turner's prediction on the game a little bit later on in the show as well. I do want to talk about something I watched last night. I know I teased that before the last break, but we'll get to it when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com.
All right. What is it? Tuesday? It's Tuesday, everybody. The Giants have hired a new offensive coordinator. Matt Nagy is being named as the new offensive coordinator for the New York Giants. Cliff Kingsbury interviewed and was also considered quite a contender. However, the Giants opt to go with the man who worked closely with Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. Plus, last night, the Caps, they earned their 2nd win in a row with a 4-1 win. Tonight, they will take on the Philadelphia Flyers. That'll be on 106.7 The Fan at 6:45. Plus, James Harden has requested a trade from the LA Clippers, who are reportedly stunned at the request. And tonight, the Wizards, they get rolling against the New York Knicks. That'll be tonight right here on the Team 980 at 6:45. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch programs like Take Command all off season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
Peterson inbounds. Under 90 seconds. They find Peterson. Launches. Hits. Oh, boy.
That's what we call a flare screen.
Everybody on their feet and love it. Peterson buries it.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a wow last night. 11th ranked Kansas was on the road against 13th ranked Texas Tech 2 days after beating BYU at Fog Allen in Lawrence. Kansas is on a roll right now. They've won 6 consecutive games. They are climbing in the polls. And Darren Peterson, who I talked about yesterday on the show, who is right now certainly an absolute lock to go 1, 2, maybe 3 in the June NBA draft, a draft that we should be paying attention to here in D.C., at least those of us that are Wizards fans, because I think this will be the last draft of this tanking stretch of trying to be bad, trying to acquire as many picks as possible, trying to swing big, trying to get lucky in the lottery, trying to get a true superstar player. And they've got some really good young players that they have drafted here and acquired here over the last couple of years. But this upcoming draft is an exciting one for everybody because at the top, there is Darren Peterson from Kansas, a 6'6", borderline point shooting guard, can play almost anywhere other than center. Then you've got AJ DeBonsa, this 6'9", long-armed Kevin Durant-looking player at BYU. Then you've got one of the most competitive dudes in the sport this year, Cam Boozer. 3 true freshmen, by the way. And I mentioned Darren Peterson's game against BYU on Saturday where he had 18 points in the first half and then was held out of the second half because of cramps, and that's happened a bunch this year. Well, last night, big game, and they've got other big games coming up. I mean, some really big games. They play Arizona, the number 1 team in the country, undefeated. They have 2 more games against Arizona. They've got another game against 10th-ranked Houston. They've got the tournament, in March. And I said yesterday, I hope that we don't find out that this kid, Darren Peterson, is essentially load managing his way through his only college season. Well, last night, 35 minutes on the road in Lubbock against a tough team. And he struggled throughout the night. And at the end, they were down 5, then they cut it to 3. Looked like they were going to lose the game. And he hit that first 3, caught it, and kind of floating right behind the arc, knocked that down. Then they got a rebound down 61 after they tied it at 61, and he calmly crossed somebody over left wing behind the arc, knocked down another 3, and there it was. 6 consecutive points to give Kansas a 64-61 win on the road. You got to watch this guy because my description isn't going to do it justice. And you've probably, if you have followed it all and haven't seen him play, you've read this about Darren Peterson. There is a calmness and a level of effortlessness to the way he plays basketball that looks different. One of the players I've enjoyed watching, over the years, DeMar DeRozan is kind of a player that just plays at his own speed. You can't hurry him up. You can't, stop him from getting to where he wants to get to. And he never really looks like he's exerting great effort. Peterson has a lot of that in him at 6'6". He's also got some real explosion, and he's got limitless range as a shooter. And then on top of that, he is a guy that gets a ton of steals on the defensive end, but they're sly. They're kind of, where did that come from? Well, he's like one of those dudes, if you've seen him in sports where they just anticipate, like they know what's happening a step ahead of everybody else on the floor. And he has that. He finished the game before those 2 threes. He had 13 points on 3 of 12 from the floor at that point. But he knocked down the 2 biggest threes of the game, ended up with 19 points in 35 minutes. played the third most minutes of anybody on the Kansas team last night. No sitting down, load managing with cramps last night, and he bailed Kansas out. The true freshman came through with 2 huge shots. He is going to be a fun player for, football season's over. If you're looking for something to watch Kansas, watch Darren Peterson. They have a game against Utah this coming weekend. They play Arizona a week from last night in Lawrence. That'll be number 1 against a top 10 team. Kansas, after their, win last night, if they get another one this week against Utah, they'll be into the top 10 more likely than not. That'll be the first game against Arizona. Then they play number 7, Iowa State. They play 8th-ranked Houston towards the end of the month, and they play Arizona again in Tucson on February 28th. So some massive games left in the regular season for Kansas and for Darren Peterson. And I promise you, if you're a basketball person, he's worth the watch. A.J. DeBonce is worth the watch, too. So is Cam Boozer. So is the kid Wagler from Illinois. There's some really good freshmen in the country this year. But Peterson's style is just interesting. Like, I find myself when I did not watch the first half of the game. Max, you said that you watched pretty much.
I watched the final 5 minutes. I was locked
final
in.
5 minutes, yeah.
But, looking at the box score wasn't a great start for him.
I found myself just watching Peterson to see what he does off the ball, to see how he defends when his man doesn't have the ball. And you see him, he's always kind of lurking. There's the guys, they're always kind of lurking, looking for, that one pass away where they can jump into a passing lane and steal it. Or when their player has it, he does a really good job of staying in front of his, as a defender, moving his feet, staying low, staying in front of the ball, keeping the ball in front of him. I like the way he defends, and he is a shooter, but he's also really a scorer. But again, like, it looks like he's barely breaking a sweat, which is just, I don't know. It's kind of enjoyable to watch. I hope we don't get any more cramps, ankles, and that he plays these games because Kansas has some massive games here down the stretch, and he's going to be a fun player to watch. That Big 12, man, Arizona's number 1, Houston, Iowa State, Kansas. We've talked about BYU, obviously. They've lost a couple in a row, but they've been ranked all year. Texas Tech, UCF is a good team. God, that conference is loaded. How many teams is that league going to get in? Where's the latest Lunardi breakdown by conference? Let's see. Big Ten's projected to get 11. Oh, okay, SEC 10, ACC 8, Big 12 7 in the tournament. I hate years in which my team isn't in the bracketology somewhere. I hate that. Bracketology is like a must-read this time of year if you're a college basketball fan of a certain team, and we just don't have that this year. Roger Goodell held his press conference, Super Bowl press conference yesterday. I wanted to mention a couple of things, and I'll scatter this in throughout the show. But he said about an 18-game schedule, it's not a given that we'll do that. It's not something that we assume will happen. It's something that we want to talk about with union leadership. That's a little bit less aggressive on the 18-game schedule than he's been in the past. One of the things that was reported on over the weekend was the salary cap is going up again significantly, over $300 million now, the NFL salary cap. I get kind of a little bit annoyed by when I hear people say, well, why would the players want to go to 18 games? What will the league give them for the 18th game? I'm not sure everybody understands this, so I'll just mention it. But the league and its players, the relationship, the crux of the relationship is a revenue split, with the players guaranteed 48% of all revenue, top line revenue, not net revenue, top line revenue, gross revenue. With, by the way, it went up to 48.8% when they got the 17th game. I'm sure most of you are capable of doing the math. If you add an 18th game, it will increase revenue because it's another football weekend on television. So now the networks will pay even more money, increase the media haul and the top line revenue number, which means their 48.8% will be worth even more money. And the salary cap will go up even more, probably exponentially with an 18 game schedule. And therefore, that's what they're getting. They're getting more revenue because they are in a revenue sharing deal with the owners. So, of course, there's a compelling reason to want that. Now, there are other things at play, clearly. The threat of injury, the threat of shortening careers, the safety, all of that. And I do think that the players should be for that increased, bonus check of an 18th game, which is 48.8% of even more revenue. But they should be looking after the safety and the benefit of their own. And I think you've got to increase roster sizes. I think you've got to go from 53 to, you've increased the practice squad size, which is essentially increasing the roster spots. But I think the game day roster has to be bigger. I think we got to get to the point where it is at least 5 to 10% larger than it is right now for that 18th game. That seems to be certainly a quid pro quo, and they may ask for a little bit more, maybe another, 0.4%. Maybe they get up to 49.2 or something like that for an 18th game. But when people say, well, what are the players getting for an 18th game? The answer is more money because they're a revenue share partner of the league, and an 18th game is going to add more revenue. It's going to increase the salary cap. There are going to be more opportunities to make more money because the salary cap keeps going up, and that's where that revenue share goes to. Entry-level salaries will increase. Everybody's going to make more money in a situation like that. But doesn't mean that they shouldn't be looking for more. And I think increased roster sizes and even certainly trying to get an even larger piece of the pie makes sense. I do think we will eventually be at 18 games. The league, the range, by the way, it's not set yet, but the cap last year was $279.2 million was the salary cap number for the NFL teams. It's going to go up to between $301 and $306 million. So it's going to increase by up to another $26 to $27 million. That's what? 7-8% increase, 279 to 306. Yeah. Something like that. So here they go. They are increasing the cap every year, and the players and the owners keep making more money because more people watch and more people are interested. And I think that's why we'll eventually get an 18-game season and maybe a President's Day weekend Super Bowl. Aaron Schatz will jump on with us next. We'll talk about Super Bowl DVOA numbers, talk about this year as well. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. Super Bowl week, New England and Seattle on Sunday. Seattle, a 4.5-point favorite. The total's 45.5. There are some fives out there, as mentioned, if you're interested in New England as an underdog. Joining us right now is Aaron Schatz. You guys know Aaron. He's been on with me before. And I reference Aaron's DVOA metric just a little bit on this show over the years. He is the creator, the innovator of the DVOA metric, a great way to measure not only teams, but units, offense, defense, and special teams in a very logical way. He joins me right now. You can follow Aaron on X, on Twitter, at ASchatzNFL, ASCHATZ. NFL on X, and he is the chief analytics officer at FTN Fantasy, which I am a subscriber of. All right, so I do, since it's Super Bowl week, and I know we've had some of these conversations before, but I think they're interesting and not everybody remembers the results. So heading into this Super Bowl, we'll get the DVOA numbers for both teams, but give me the highest rated Super Bowl entrant of all time. I know it's your highest rated super team of all time, but give me the lowest rated DVOA team to make a Super Bowl.
The highest rated based on the regular season was the 2007 Patriots.
Right.
Once you add in the playoffs, it's the 1991 Redskins.
Lowest.
And the lowest is the
the lowest regular season to make it.
2008 Arizona Cardinals. That team lost to the Matt Castle Patriots. No Tom Brady.
47 to something, right?
47 to 7. Yeah, in week 16 in a snowstorm. Yes.
I remember saying on the air, there's no chance a team that got beat 47 to 7 can make a Super Bowl. So by the way, where were they ranked at the end of that regular season per DVOA?
23rd.
Wow. Is anybody even close to that in terms of a Super Bowl participant?
No, nobody else is lower than like 16th.
And they almost won it. If it hadn't been
almost won it.
Yeah. Number 10, the MVP, the receiver who I'm blanking on right now.
Santonio Holmes.
Thank you, Santonio Holmes. Who turned out to be the MVP on that last pass. I'll tell you what, though, Kurt Warner was one hell of a quarterback. So I saw what you did and you put out, I guess, recently, and that is the DVOA through conference championship games over the last 13 seasons, going back to 2013. So I want to make sure that I understand this correctly. These are the teams that once they got into the postseason, then you started it all over from a DVOA standpoint, correct?
No, it adds in the regular season to the playoffs.
Okay.
So it's both regular season and playoffs.
Okay.
One rating is their total. That's the whole season. And the other one is weighted towards the late season games.
Got it. So who's been, give me the strongest from that standpoint and the weakest, because I think we might have one of them in the Super Bowl on Sunday.
So that's the thing. The strongest team, if you use the entire regular season plus the playoffs, since 2007, is this year's Seahawks. They are one of the all-time great teams by my numbers. They have been fantastic. They have dominated good opponents. Their win over San Francisco in the divisional round was the best single game of the year. Their defense and special teams have been fantastic. Their defense is like 12th to 13th in history. Their special teams were second this year behind the Jets, who had great special teams and were horrible in every other way. And the Seahawks have a good offense too. So everything is working for them. The Patriots are very interesting because the Patriots have a huge difference between their total rating for the entire season and their weighted rating that drops the early season games, because they had their worst games early in the year.
True, against the Raiders in the opener and the Steelers. Yeah.
And the Dolphins in week 2. They did not play well, even though they won that game. And then their best games have been in the last 6 or 7 weeks. So they are peaking now. If you do the total rating, including the playoffs, they're 7th. But if you do the weighted rating that gives more weight to recent games, they're 2nd behind only the Seahawks.
That's interesting to me because I understand you take out those early season games, and now their overall regular season number climbs because the final regular season number on New England, and I am a subscriber, you had them at 9th, the 9th best team in the league. And then we saw 3 pretty subpar playoff games, not defensively, but offensively. So overall, was it the defense that just was incredibly highly rated during these 3 games?
Yes. The defense was very good during the 3 games, and more of those mediocre games from the regular season have now moved further into the back, have moved further into the earlier period that we drop. So as those mediocre games from weeks 4, 5, 6, whatever, get dropped, and you add in these good playoff games where the offense struggled but the defense was good, the Patriots just look better and better.
You said something I want to go back to. You said that Seattle's defense was one of the best ever. I'm assuming the 85 Bears per DVOA is the greatest defense ever, correct?
The 1991 Eagles are the best defense ever. The year that Randall Cunningham tore his ACL and they missed the playoffs because they had a horrible quarterback play, but the defense was fantastic. The 85 Bears are 4th.
Ooh, who's second?
Third.
Say that again.
Buccaneers. It goes 91 Eagles, 2002 Bucks, then the 86 Bears and the 85 Bears.
The 86 Bears defense per DVOA was better than the 85 Bears. Is that kind of like, I'm curious, where are the 76 Steelers on that list of greatest defenses of all time?
78. I only go back to 78 right now.
Because that 76 Steelers team, which lost Bradshaw for a big portion of the season, most Pittsburgh fans will tell you that was their best defensive team and one of the greatest defensive teams ever. I think they had, Aaron, you have to go back and look it up by memory. It's like four shutouts in about 6 or 7 games where they held opposition to under 10. So where does Seattle come in on the list of greatest defenses ever?
So this year, Seattle defense comes in 12th.
Okay. Just
ahead of the 2013 Seattle defense, which comes in 14th and won the Super Bowl.
You know, I may have asked you this mid-season when you were on with me, but the trend hadn't really grown to a point where the best teams were led by their defense. Is it my imagination, or did we see a resurgence of defense equaling more wins this year? It seems to me that Houston, Seattle, the Rams, although their defense fell off a bit, Denver, Jacksonville, Philly, that we had more of the better defensive teams in the league end up with more wins than in previous years. Correct or not?
Yeah, the Rams were the number 1 offense, so I wouldn't really put them in this category, even though their defense was really good.
Fair.
But otherwise, I would say you're correct that the top defenses were the top among most of the top teams this year. The exception was Cleveland because their offense and special teams were so unbelievably bad.
Yeah.
That the fact that they had the number 5 defense and the best player in the game didn't matter.
Why do you think it is? We saw it in the Super Bowl last year. We saw Philly be defensive-led during the postseason in particular. Why do you think we've seen this resurgence of defense? You know, the old saying, defense wins championships, offense puts people in the seats. That, of course, went away for a long period of time. It appears to be back. Is it short-term? I know there's a lot of variance with defense, but do you have any explanation for it?
No, I think it's short-term. I think it's just sort of, the ebb and flow of the game. And this was a particularly weird year, okay? First of all, teams were very different from how they were projected in the preseason this year. Second of all, there were a number of teams that had good underlying performance that didn't make the playoffs. and bad teams that did make the playoffs. You know, on one hand, you have your Kansas City and your Detroit, Indianapolis, and on the other hand, you have like Carolina. So it was a very kind of topsy-turvy year, and I think that things will probably go back to being more offense-focused next season.
Who was the biggest obviously the biggest surprise was New England, correct? Or was it Seattle?
I mean, I think New England was a bigger surprise, even though Seattle was a better team during the regular season.
Right. So who was, based on your preseason predictions, who was the biggest disappointment?
Washington.
Washington was.
But, I mean, injuries are to blame for a lot of that. Their defense, I thought their defense was going to be kind of average, and their defense was really bad. But their offense, a lot of it can be blamed on the injuries. You know, you lose your quarterback, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah, no, I think we all understand what the injuries did to their season. It's funny because their DVOA defensive ranking was 28th. But I'm curious, is there any way for you to tell me what it was over the back half of the season? I can't imagine there was a worse defense than Washington's over their final 8 or 9 games.
There was, because this year had a very large range of defenses. It was a year that had some particularly good defenses and some really, really bad ones. So Dallas, for example, is one of the worst defenses we've ever measured. But you're right about Washington. So Washington over the first 5 weeks of the season was good. They had good wins, and then everything collapsed, especially the defense. So from like week 6 to the end of the season, they were like 30th.
By the way, just so everybody knows this, per Aaron's DVOA metric, Washington had the 3rd best special teams unit in the league. Seattle's second, and believe it or not, the Jets were number 1. I don't know how that happened with the Jets. I know that they had some big returns, but I also know that they recovered some fumbles on kicks, maybe had a block kick or two. Why were the Jets the number 1 special teams unit in the league?
They were good at everything. They were like a historically good special teams unit, which is kind of crazy because normally to have good special teams, you need to have a deep roster, right? It's not just about having good specialists. It's about having a deep roster so you get blocking and you get gunners and not the Jets, but still amazing. The punting, they were the best punting team in the league. Kick returns, they were the best team in the league. Field goals, best team in the league. Punt returns, also awesome. Kickoffs were like average, but they were the best. Yeah, they were the best special teams. It's really funny because they were so bad in every other way. If you take special teams out and only look at offense and defense, they were something like the 5th worst team I've ever measured.
Who is the worst team you've ever measured?
The 2005, I think, San Francisco 49ers, even though they won 4 games, they won 4 games very close, and they got absolutely slaughtered in their other 12 games.
I think Washington.
Alex Smith's rookie year.
Yeah. I think in 2005, Washington put 52 up on them. That year. I'm just going to look at that. Yeah, 52-17, Washington beat them in 2005. All right, we're talking to Aaron Schatz, creator of the DVOA. It is Super Bowl week. He's already told you, where Washington's combined regular season and playoff blended has them, and it is as the number 1 team of all time. So break it down: offense, defense, special teams, regular season plus postseason. And by the way, remember their postseason was Atlanta and Detroit, 2 games at home. It wasn't some of the better teams of that era. It wasn't New York. It wasn't Chicago. It wasn't San Francisco. It was an odd year, where Washington dominated, and Jimmy's teams in Dallas, that was their first playoff year. But just tell everybody, why Washington in 91 is the greatest team in the history of you measuring DVOA for regular season plus postseason.
Incredibly well balanced, right? So I've got like 450 teams or whatever that I've got data for. The Washington of 91 is the only team that's in the top 60 for offense, defense, and special teams. It's a really interesting team because in many ways it's a one-off, right? They're not a dynasty. They didn't have a number of good years. In a way, they remind me a little bit of this year's Seahawks because they have a quarterback that nobody at the time said this is one of the best quarterbacks in the game. But for 1 year, he was so good and everything around him was so good that they won this title in such dominant fashion. It kind of reminds me of this year's Seahawks.
Would the Patriots of 07 been in that number one spot had they beaten the Giants?
I mean, if they had beaten them by more than a touchdown, yeah.
By more than a touchdown. Yeah, because Washington dominated all three of their postseason games, including the Super Bowl over a Buffalo team that was pretty good that year, right? That was a pretty good opponent.
Yeah, gradually those Buffalo teams get worse as you go along, and the difference between the NFC and the AFC gets bigger. So by the time you get to like 1993, the Buffalo's not really that good. It's just that the whole AFC was bad. But 91 Buffalo was pretty good.
Yeah, the interestingly, they barely beat Denver in the AFC Championship game that year, 10-7, same score as last week's AFC title game. But, Marv Levy, Jim Kelly, a lot of those guys of the 4 Super Bowls they lost to the Giants, Washington, and Dallas twice, they're all pretty convinced and pretty uniform that the 91 Skins were the best of the 4 teams they played. They all feel that way. I've heard them say that many times. And you would obviously agree with that, that the 91 team. That's good to know because I've always kind of, we've debated the 91 Skins a lot over the years. And they've gotten cited. They've been, there have been accolades for them, but your accolade is the highest in terms of the blended regular season and postseason. So, of Washington's 4 Super Bowl participation teams, they won 3 under Gibbs. After 91, do you know how to rank the 82, 83, and 87 teams in what order they are?
83 would be number 2.
Yeah.
That team was a real surprise that they lost the Super Bowl. That was the team that had like a plus 30 turnovers or something.
Plus 42.
Completely absurd.
Plus 42.
Yeah, just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like I thought saying plus 30 was ridiculous, and I didn't even get to how ridiculous it actually was because it was so crazy. Then 82 was after that, and then 87. I take out the strike games. I only look at the 12 games with the actual players. And that 87 team was not really that good during the regular season.
So the 83 team, where does the 83 team rank among the greatest offenses in history per DVOA?
Not as high as you would think, but they're pretty high up there. Let me see here. They were number 1 for that year, but they're only about like 50 or 60 in history.
Interesting. Because that was the highest scoring team ever that year. And by the way, the 91 team was also the highest scoring team. Where's the 91 offense rank?
The 91 offense is, hold on a second, is 53rd out of like whatever, 1,400 teams.
What is the number 1 offensive football team per DVOA of all time?
The number 1 offensive football team is the 2010 New England Patriots. That was the rookie year. It's a crazy year. It's the year they traded Randy Moss early in the season, and they had the rookie Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez. And then they lost in the playoffs to the Jets by 7 points after they had beaten them by like 40 only like 3 weeks before.
Yeah, they lost at home. That was the Rex Ryan team.
That was the Rex Ryan foot game where Wes Welker made a joke about Rex Ryan's foot fetish and had to sit out the first quarter.
Yeah, and Mark Sanchez was the quarterback. So when you look ahead to next year, what can you say about next year today?
I think that with this year being so topsy-turvy, and a number of teams that were very high in my ratings missing the playoffs, I think you're going to see those teams come back next year. I think you're going to see Detroit rebound. I think you're going to see Kansas City rebound. I think, Buffalo, I mean, they were good this year, but I think they're going to play a little bit better next year. I think that you'll see sort of a reestablishing of the top teams that we've seen from the last few years.
What do you think about Washington next year? I mean, you don't. It's hard,
They've
right?
Be better than this.
Yeah,
They've got to be better with Daniels back.
How does DVOA account for injuries? It doesn't, right?
It does. No, well, it doesn't. It doesn't. But when I do projections for next year, I will account for injuries. So, for example, I will project that Daniels is the quarterback. Right. And you look at players returning from injury, the major players returning from injury on offense and defense. And there's no question that will make Washington's projection higher. I don't think they'll project to be as good as they were last year, but they'll project to be at least like 500. The problem is the defense is still super old. Defense and special teams, they were just really old this year. And I don't see they're going to have to cut a lot of players in order to get younger. Normally, age does not necessarily affect how well you play. There have been really good older defenses. Like a lot of Steelers defenses in the last 15 years were older, but still played really well. But there's no question that there are a number of players on that defense that are. Bobby Wagner has seen better days, for example.
You're always so well prepared for the market that you're going on in. What did you have prepared for me about Washington's DVOA history or even this year that I didn't ask you about?
No, I didn't have anything prepared. I just know this stuff.
Okay. Well, when I ask you, you usually always have an answer, but I just figured you were well prepared. So I'm like, I wonder what he has maybe that he hasn't cleared out of the notebook. All right, let's look ahead to Sunday. Obviously, DVOA tells you that Seattle should be favored, but by how many?
I always think by like 3. I actually like the Patriots to cover as the underdog because they've been so much better in recent weeks, right? It is this sort of weird situation where I'm like, the Seahawks are historically great. But this game is closer than you think. It's not as close as the last Patriots-Seahawks Super Bowl. That one was truly 50-50 before the game started. This one, the Seahawks are definitely better, but I do think that the line should be more like 3 rather than 4.5. And you can definitely see a situation in which the Patriots win. First of all, like any other game, you could have big turnovers. You could have special teams. These two teams are both very good at punt returns. So if one of them gets a punt return touchdown, that's a big deal.
Sure.
The other thing is the Patriots, their defense has really come to the fore over the last 5 weeks through very heavy blitzing. And Sam Darnold struggled against the blitz. He was something like 23rd against the blitz this year. And even 2 weeks ago in the NFC Championship game, when he played very well against the Rams, he did not play very well when the Rams blitzed him. So that is a weakness that he has that goes right up against what the Patriots have been doing on defense.
Yeah, one of the things that I've talked about this week and even late last week is that if you go back and you look at Seattle's, run here recently, and you said that their 41-6 win over San Francisco was the most impressive win of the season. But the Rams defense definitely was worse over the last quarter to third of the season than it was at the beginning. And I went back, and it's been almost since Atlanta or Minnesota, end of November, early December, where Seattle's faced an outstanding defensive team. And they're going to get that on Sunday, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Patriots look like one now. They certainly didn't for most of the season. For most of the season, the defense was the place where the schedule was a big issue because the Patriots were just clobbering backup quarterbacks. But in the playoffs and in the last couple of weeks of the season, they just dominated. And then in the playoffs, they've played against better offenses, not great offenses, right? Offenses with offensive line problems and then a snowstorm.
Yep.
But this defense has played
quarterback
much better, and it's a very, it looks like a strong defense at this point.
I did have one other question for you. How did DVOA treat the Bears this year?
They're sort of like the mini Patriots. They also had an easy schedule and won close games. I think they ended the season something like 12th and then like 10th in the weighted rating.
Okay.
They were also better in the second half of the season than they were in the first half of the season.
There's this belief that Chicago's season in many ways mirrored Washington's 2024 season with the schedule, with the close games, et cetera. Do you see a fall off for the Bears in 2026?
It's possible. Now, if you look at the biggest reasons for Washington's fall off, they are the age on defense and the injuries, and you can't predict injuries.
Right.
And the Bears won't have that age on defense problem that Washington had.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think actually they just have a better overall roster than Washington had coming into this season. Always enjoy it, Aaron. Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of the week and the game on Sunday. Appreciate it.
Thanks, folks. FTNFantasy.com. That's the website. Check it out.
It's a good one, and you get all of the DVOA numbers, and as a subscriber, it gets into great detail on all three areas of the game. I love referencing it. I think it's a good way to kind of measure a team's strength or lack thereof during the course of the season and the postseason. Thanks, Aaron. Talk to you soon.
All right.
Aaron Schatz, everybody. We'll talk to Liam Griffin from the Washington Times. He covers the Skins. We'll start to look ahead to free agency with Liam. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Liam Griffin covers our football team for the Washington Times. At by Liam Griffin on X. He joins us right now. So the coordinator positions have been filled. I don't think we've had you on the show since the end of the season. And let me just get your thoughts on both of those hires: the David Blau elevation promotion and the Durante Jones hire. How have you been talking about those two and writing about those two, positions filled?
Yeah, so David Blau is someone who I wasn't completely surprised by. I know there's a lot of concern about his lack of experience in the coaching ranks, but he's someone who is so incredibly well regarded in that building. He has such a close relationship with those quarterbacks, and he's someone who, even before Tavita Pritchard left, he took over the quarterbacks coach role on his own. He's someone who is looked at as a rising star, as someone who is going to get coordinator consideration. And so when the Detroit Lions said, hey, we want to interview this guy for our OC opening, the commander said, no, we're not going to let that happen. We're going to keep him in the building. We're going to take that chance. He's someone who has a lot of, he's worked with a lot of different coaches. He was worked with Kevin O'Connell. He's worked with Ben Johnson. He's worked with Cliff Kingsbury. I think that scheme is going to look more like those first two guys than anything that Kingsbury was working with, just based on some of the play designs he's called up. That's the other thing, is that he has experience drawing up the play. So I'm kind of bullish on the David Blau promotion. And then at defensive coordinator, I went pretty deep on Durante Jones in an article last week, and I was just really impressed with his resume and with his track record. He's someone who has coached at every level of football you can imagine, from Louisiana high schools to the CFL to Division II, Division III, and he's had pretty impressive results just about everywhere he's gone. Again, it's kind of a similar thing where, well, can he do it at that coordinator level? He's had kind of limited opportunities, mostly at college, a season with LSU, some time with Bowie State, but everyone who works with him is impressed. And more importantly for the Commanders, just about everywhere he goes, turnovers follow. And for a team that has really struggled to get those takeaways, and the defense has struggled in turn, I think that's a really, really key component when they're bringing in a new coordinator.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that, one of the things when they hired Quinn is wherever Quinn goes, turnovers follow. And we haven't had him for 2 years, but you're right. And the Brian Flores system has produced a lot of that. So let's focus on that, because I think most people now understand, and I totally agree with you. The moment Blau arrived in that building, they thought this was possible, if not wanted it to be possible, and didn't want him to leave the building. And I think everybody now knows Ben Johnson's got influence, Kevin O'Connell, the Shanahan system, there's some influence there, and obviously Cliff. And we'll see what we see, and it'll be a little bit different than what we've seen the last 2 years. Defensively is what I'm interested in. Do you think we will see a Brian Flores system, loading up the line of scrimmage, trying to confuse opposing passers? And what will that mean in terms of the types of players they go after in both free agency and the draft?
Yeah, I would be surprised if that you don't see some of that Brian Flores DNA come here. Obviously, Brian Flores was going to be the top of anyone's wish list when they were interviewing coaches. But then, they had that question during the interviews. They say, all right, we liked interviewing this guy. We would have loved to have him. He's stuck in Minnesota. I would only assume that Durante Jones is going to bring something similar, because why wouldn't you? It's something that has worked throughout the league. Minnesota's defense wasn't really well steeped in kind of premier blue chip talent, but they were still one of the best defenses in the league, because that scheme is able to just absolutely terrorize opposing quarterbacks and opposing play callers. And interestingly, I think that there are players who are already on this roster who are well suited to make that shift to a more Flores-like scheme. Two guys who I keep thinking about, a handful, really. Jordan McGee, I think, is someone who, working that sideline to sideline role, is going to potentially thrive in that kind of system. Same with Frankie Louvu, maybe doing an Andrew Van Ginkel-like role. Andrew Van Ginkel is someone who drives other teams crazy, because it seems like he's just always getting his hands on the ball, always getting a free rush, and always making a turnover. And I think Frankie Louvu has a similar skill set. And then I also think it'll really open up things for the much maligned Quan Martin, who has really struggled last season, was not able to tackle well in space, didn't make the kind of takeaways. He had a couple interceptions called back on penalties, but I think he's someone who, if you get him down in the box, I think you will see his athleticism really start to shine. And I think that'll really open up some things for that defense. But you mentioned you're going to bring in some new types of players. I'll be looking for a lot of turnover on the defensive line once again, because they just parted ways with Ryan Kerrigan and with Sharif Floyd. Durante Jones is presumably going to bring in some of his own guys who he has experience with there. And so the kind of skill sets he'll be looking for is something I'll be watching out. Where is he looking for bigger bodies? Is he looking for more athletic guys on the edge? Like, what are they going to be drawn to in free agency in the draft?
I love the Luvu mention, and it's such a good one. I mean, I personally don't think he has Van Ginkel's true anticipation talent, but he has some of that, and I think he's going to be a really interesting player for Durante Jones. I'd be surprised if he hasn't already identified Luvu as, this is a guy that's going to be a real factor in our defense. And by the way, with that said, there are a couple of guys that we know that Tunsil has to be extended. You agree with that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt.
So I think you've got to think about extending Luvu. And by the way, it might be the right time to extend him coming off a season that wasn't, necessarily, a season that resembled 2024 for him. Do you think there's a chance they extend Luvu in this offseason?
I do. I think that would be a good move, especially with the way the linebacker market is set up. You don't want to let them get to the end of that contract if it's someone you want to keep around, because the franchise tag is really untenable for that position because of the way edge rushers are factored in.
Right.
And he's someone who has that high ceiling. He was an all-pro last, 2024. They are top tier linebackers, and they're doing it in a defensive scheme that maybe didn't fully suit their skill sets. And so I think Frankie Luvu is a great player. He's a great locker room presence. I know that's kind of cliche to say, but he's a really fiery guy too. He has that energy. And those things do help, especially when you're bringing in a new defense and you're bringing in a new defensive coordinator and philosophy, to have someone who can help rally the troops and who can, playing with the hair on fire kind of guy. I think he has the versatility to really be a difference maker in that defense.
Do you expect that the base defense, and most teams are not in their base anywhere near the majority of the time, but will the base defense 1st and 10 often be a 3-4?
I would expect them to shift to a 3-4 more often, but as you alluded to, I think the base defense is so relatively rare compared to what it used to be. The actual base defense these days is going to be that nickel. But in those situations, I do think you're going to see more of a 3-4. And I think if they add another linebacker, they're close to having the personnel to be well suited for that with Luvu, Wagner, and McGee. I've been really impressed by McGee during that last stretch of the season. I'm interested to see what he can do with another offseason under his belt. And, assuming Wagner doesn't retire, we have no idea about that. But they're looking like they have the personnel to do that. So I don't see why you wouldn't, especially when that defensive front has been so lackluster. You don't have the same kind of, we talked about a couple of all-pros in the linebacker group. You don't have all-pros on the defensive line. Deron Payne has not completely lived up, and he might be a cut candidate this offseason. Javon Kinlaw, I thought has played all right, but maybe not living up entirely to that contract. And so if you can play to that strength, I don't see why you wouldn't.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I went and looked this up. The guy that played more nose tackle, more zero technique, over the center nose tackle when they were in kind of their 5-man fronts, which, sometimes looks like a 3-4, was actually Eddie Goldman. I mean, he played more of that than Kinlaw or Payne. Goldman, I'm not expecting that to be a priority in terms of re-signing, but they probably have to look for somebody like that unless they feel like it's Kinlaw or Payne. You just said, and I'll just ask you, Wagner, Payne, Lattimore. I think we'd all agree Lattimore's not back. Wagner and Payne, are they both back or not?
Bobby Wagner, I think it's going to be entirely up to him whether he decides he wants to keep playing or not. He did not make any allusions to retirement during our last conversations with him. So I would lean towards him not retiring. And if so, I would probably expect him to re-sign with this team, assuming he, likes the Durante Jones scheme. They're probably going to have those conversations. but I know he likes it in Washington, and he obviously loves Dan Quinn. So I would expect him to be back around as like the most likely. Deron Payne is kind of an open question. They can save about $17 million if they part ways with him this offseason. And so it'll depend what the market looks like. I feel like, where do you feel like you can replace his production? Maybe. And do who else is going to be able to fill that role in your defense? And then I agree with you. I think Marshawn Lattimore is no doubt gone. He's going to free up $18.5 million. He has not performed well. He's coming off an injury. He's approaching his 30s. He had some off the field issues too. I don't see any way that Marshawn Lattimore is back in Washington. But yeah, Deron Payne is really going to be the biggest question mark for them this offseason, since that Tunsil extension is really a given. Adam Peters is going to have a tough decision to make with Deron Payne.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how much Durante Jones will, be involved in sort of looking at what he has, which isn't much. That's the problem, right? Is that they don't have much. And you've got a guy that's only 29 years old and probably has as much talent as anybody you have on that side of the ball. Just incredible inconsistency. And yet the one season, Liam, in which he was dominant start to finish was the contract year 2022, and he's entering a contract year this year. So that's going to be a really interesting thing. Ben reported last week that it's very likely they're bringing him back, and they'll just be okay with the $28 million cap number next year because they have plenty of space. Dorrance Armstrong will be coming off an injury, but he's under contract. Dietrich Wise isn't. Is there anybody else? Like, I do think that they'll probably make an attempt to re-sign Jacob Martin, don't you?
Yeah, he's someone who there is not much to feel good about in the edge rusher group. Von Miller was leading the team in sacks. Dorrance Armstrong was leading the team in sacks through like December, even though he had a season-ending injury. But Jacob Martin kind of flashed a little bit. He's someone who could be a good rotational piece. Elsewhere on that defense, Von Miller wants to come back. Whether the Commanders want him back is an open question. But he's someone else who is, latter end of his career, but doesn't look like he's retiring. Other than that, I mean, it is slim pickings. I don't expect Preston Smith to be back. I don't expect Jalen Holmes to be back. Like, it is Drake Jackson is someone who I could see another off season without injury, working back into the rotation. They were pretty high on his potential, but they haven't seen it on the field. But I also kind of see that as a potential positive. If you're Durante Jones and you're looking to bring in a completely new system, you're joining a team that has probably going to end up, after cutting Marshawn Lattimore, around $80 million in cap space. How much are they going to say, all right, Durante, like, who are you interested in? Who's going to be a good fit for you? Who already knows your scheme? Who do you like? And I think he's going to have some input on that defense, because Dan Quinn is someone who, I think he learned what went wrong with Joe Witt. And so I think making that kind of outside the box hire, he has never worked with Durante Jones before, I don't think. And so, I think you're going to see some of Durante Jones's fingerprint on the defensive moves that are made this offseason.
What do you think he learned from the Joe Witt experience, Quinn?
Yeah. So, I mean, he did two completely different paths when he chose coordinators to come to Washington with him. He brought in Joe Witt, who he had a ton of experience with, who he knew very well, who was going to run the same kind of, quote unquote, Dan Quinn system that you're familiar with. Excuse me. And then he brought in Cliff Kingsbury, who he had never worked with before. They'd never shared a coaching room. He had a very different offensive philosophy from what you would associate with a defensive head coach. And you got kind of mixed results on both. I would say the offense turned out better than the defense, but I think he learned to accept other voices in the building and to experiment with new things. He said that in his end of season presser. He was like, things that worked 10 to 15 years ago aren't going to work now. You have to adapt. You have to change, or else you're going to die. You're not going to be able to survive in this league if you're not able to bring in these new philosophies. And that's why I think they were so drawn to Durante Jones, because they say, all right, what the Vikings are doing is what's working right now. It's not the cover 3 Legion of Boom. It is something completely different that offenses haven't figured out yet. And so I think he learned to adapt and to change and to bring in new voices, even if it maybe is a little bit of a risk.
Looking at the free agents for the upcoming, period starting in March, I mean, do you have names that you think they should target?
I mean, in a perfect world, this is going to happen every off season where every fan base is going to feel like their team didn't do enough in free agency. I think this team really needs another wide receiver. It's unclear if Deebo Samuel is going to be around. I would lean towards him not being in Washington again. And so that leaves a big opening across from Terry McLaurin. And you don't want to have to rely on draft picks. I think they've kind of learned that from the past. So I would expect them to try to add some kind of wide receiver in free agency. George Pickens is obviously top of the market there. Alec Pierce from the Indianapolis Colts is someone who might be more in their wheelhouse. But outside of that, they need help at edge. And so Jalen Phillips is someone who's going to be a free agent. Trey Hendrickson from the Cincinnati Bengals. Those are going to be those big names. But I think there's going to be options that we don't expect that we find out have a tie to Durante Jones in the past. And so I'd look at them adding a couple edge rushers, adding a athletic linebacker who can help work in that system, and then potentially in secondary. But again, there's so many holes on this team that the wish list runs long. You can look at just like a list of top free agents, like, oh yeah, Tariq Woolen would be great here. A nice, speedy, rangy cornerback. That's something that Mikey Singer still doesn't quite provide. That would work great together. But it's going to be, how do you start that list of priorities? Because you can't fill every hole in free agency despite how much you'd like to.
Last one. The Giants just filled their offensive coordinator opening with Matt Nagy. So he's the new Giants offensive coordinator under John Harbaugh. Cliff Kingsbury is still out there without a gig. Is there a job for him or not?
Well, there's only two openings left. It's the New York Jets, which I don't think is going to be high on the list of any offensive coordinator, let alone a guy who has previous play calling experience and previous head coaching experience. I'd be shocked if he decides he wants to head to the Jets, where there's question marks everywhere and that job security is less than ideal. And then you're going to look at the Seattle Seahawks, where Clint Kubiak is looking for a head coaching job. And I think that would be a really interesting fit with the weapons that they have out there and working with Sam Darnold. But we also know that Cliff's not worried about money. I think he is still getting paid by the Arizona Cardinals. And so I think that he won't be shy about sitting out a season and say, all right, I'll come back next offseason. I'll be a popular offensive coordinator candidate again, and I'll show people what I can do. But I do think that Seattle opening, I have no idea. I haven't heard anything about who they may be targeting. Obviously, they're kind of busy this week. But I think that would be a really interesting scheme fit for them, given Jackson Smith and Jigba and Cooper Kupp, and working with, the resurgent Sam Darnold might be an interesting proposition for Cliff Kingsbury.
It just would be, for me, though, I mean, Darnold's had success with Kevin O'Connell, and Clint Kubiak. And this is precisely one of the reasons, anyway, maybe not the reason, that Quinn is kind of moving on from Kingsbury, is because his offense is different from that. I would imagine Seattle, that it would be square peg round hole with Kingsbury and what he would want to do offensively based on what they've been doing. No?
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. And that's why I would not be surprised if they go with an internal hire.
Yeah.
But that offense has been really successful this year. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think players are more adaptable than we often give them credit for. Even Sam Darnold, who has been maligned for his ability to adapt to different offenses, I think players are willing to work with different things. And I think more and more coaches, especially young coaches like Mike McDonald, are willing to take those chances, even if they may not pan out. But yeah, that Shanahan system is so strong. And obviously the Kubiak family is a key part of that. You can't talk about Shanahan's without talking about Kubiak's. And so I do think that they would be, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But at the same time, if you believe in what you saw from Washington the past two seasons, despite injuries and despite inconsistent quarterback play, and, I think that would be an interesting proposition for the Seahawks.
All right, we're talking to Liam Griffin. Last one. We are still, 2+ months, almost 3 months away from being on the clock at number 7. But right now, who would you like them to take at number 7 when we get there late April?
I would love for them to get one of those top defenders. I know it's kind of a cop-out answer, but I don't think you can really go wrong. I think if you end up with Ruben Bain, that's a win. I think if you end up with Arvell Reese, you feel pretty good. I think if you end up with Caleb Downs, even though he's a safety, I would not feel bad about that at pick number 7 at all. I think if they can walk away with any of those, I think I said three players. I think you feel pretty good about where you're at, because those are blue chip talents. And even though linebacker and safety aren't considered the right positional value picks, I think they are what you need. And I also think that those are very important positions for a Durante Jones scheme if he's going to do anything similar to what Brian Flores was running. Those linebackers and those safeties are so important, and their versatility is really, really key to make that whole scheme work. And obviously every team's always going to want to load up on edge rushers, especially one that has such a gap like the Commanders. So those are the 3 players that I'm really, really high on in this draft process: is Arvell Reese, Caleb Downs, and Ruben Bain. If you end up with any of those 3, I think the fan base can at least breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief and say, okay, maybe the defense won't be quite as terrible.
Liam, good job. Appreciate it. You're doing a good job covering the team. We'll do it again before the draft.
Appreciate you.
Liam Griffin, everybody, from the Washington Times. Scott Turner, I played some of my conversation end of last week with Scott Turner on the show yesterday, but you're going to hear Scott Turner compare Jaden Daniels and Drake May when we come back, and also tell the story of how he was the first college coach to offer Stefon Diggs a scholarship. That's next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Former Skins OC Scott Turner was on my podcast Friday, spent an hour with me. We played some of it yesterday, and I'm going to play some of it today because there was some really good stuff on Jaden Daniels. Drake May had some stories about recruiting Stephon Diggs when he was a graduate assistant. I'm not a graduate assistant, when he was an offensive assistant and a wide receivers coach at the University of Pittsburgh. He was really good. Had a lot of stories, by the way, that I haven't played for you about during those years in the 90s when his dad was the head coach here. But I asked him, and we'll kick off this segment with the question I asked him, which was, simply put, your opinion on Jaden Daniels. Baller. Yeah, for sure. I know you liked Jaden coming out. I also know that you liked Drake May a lot coming out. And there is a debate, Scott, among, Skins fans and maybe even NFL fans to a certain degree with Drake May in the Super Bowl. Did New England actually get it right? Or did Washington get it right? Between those two, it's pretty early, I would think, to kind of come up with an answer to that. But do you have an early opinion one way or the other?
I mean, either guy is good. They're both really good players. I mean, obviously Drake May had such a good year this year. Jaden Daniels was unbelievable. I mean, he covered up so much for that team the year before, and he just, he had some injuries, and he's gonna, and I don't think it was his play style, but part of that as you grow in the league is learning how to take care of yourself and what you can and can't do. And I think he's a good enough player, and he has a great instincts. He'll figure that out. But that's going to be the Drake May, Jaden Daniels. People are going to be arguing about that on Dragon Sports Talk Radio for 15 years.
What about Caleb Williams being a part of that debate?
Yeah, big fan of his as well. I mean, you're talking about, what a great draft class that was,
Were you surprised that Dan Quinn moved on from Kingsbury and elevated David Blau?
I don't know. I don't ever get surprised anymore, other than I was surprised that I got let go. But no, it's just you never know what's going on inside an NFL building. Obviously, yeah, there was a little bit of a surprise, but I'm sure that Dan Quinn, he's a great coach, and I know people that have been around David Blau that are that say how bright he is and how much of a great future he has, and I'm sure he's got a great relationship with the quarterback, and they obviously feel really confident about him, or they wouldn't have made that move.
I've heard you tell this story before, but I want you to tell my listeners about recruiting Stephon Diggs when you were at the University of Pittsburgh.
When I was receiver coach at University of Pittsburgh, I went into Good Counsel High School, and they had a bunch of really good players. They were in WCAC. I think they won the championship or finished second that year, whatever. But I sat down with Kevin McFadden, who's a security guard, and he's the head of security, and he's a kind of a legend in the high school area. And he was showing me the highlight tape from the year before, and I had already met all these kids in there, and they had a kid, Lou Young, that was going to Georgia Tech, who had been a senior. So I hadn't met him because obviously he was graduating. It was in January, and every third play on his highlight tape was number 7 was making all these plays, and so I just assumed it was Lou Young. And then 15 plays into the tape, this number 1 makes a play, and he goes, "Oh, that's Lou. He's going to Georgia Tech." And I'm like, "Well, hold on a second. Who's number 7 then?" You know what I mean? And he's like, "Oh, well, that's Diggs." He was like, I was like, "Mac, you've introduced me to every single kid in this school. I got to meet him." And he was like, "Well, Coach Malloy, Bob Malloy is another legendary high school coach.
Of course.
He said, Coach Malloy doesn't want Diggs talking in colleges. He's got to get his grades up because he had some academic issues." And I go, "Look, man, I'm not leaving here until I meet him." So he brought him down, and I met him, and he didn't have any scholarship offers because they had kept the college coaches away from him. But I offered him a scholarship, and then I left, and Bob Malloy called me and was like, "I'm trying to keep him humble. Why did you do that?" I was like, "Coach, I couldn't not do that. I mean, after what I just watched, because he was playing all over the field, running back, receiver, DB, blitzing. I mean, he did everything, punt returner, kick returner, and I mean, he looked exactly like he looks now, except he's a sophomore in high school. So, and he's got such a great personality, Stephon. So then I came back in spring recruiting, or I came back in January. I talked to him again. Then I come back in spring recruiting. I probably broke some NCAA rules as far as how often I go back to that school. And and he'd be, I'd come back in the afternoon because he would run track, and I'd walk around track with him. I remember talking to him and, really getting to know him. And I ended up leaving Pitt after that, after that next season, which was his junior year. And then, he ended up going to Maryland, and, he had 80 offers by the time his junior football season started. So I was just the first one. That was after his sophomore year. And then, he ended up going to Maryland, and he had kind of a up and down career. He had a great freshman year, and he was always productive, but when he was on the field, but he had some injuries, like major injuries.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then by the time he was coming out, I was the Vikings, and I just remember like telling everybody, anyone that would listen, like, we got to get this guy. Like, we got to get this guy on our team. And everyone was like, well, I don't know. The coaches say he could be a little moody, and, because he's such a competitive, emotional player. But it's all geared towards wanting to win. And I was like, I promise you guys. So he ends up dropping, and we got, 2 picks in the 5th round. And I get called in the draft room. I'm the quarterback coach. And I'm like, well, why are they calling me in here? And Zimmer, who can be a little gruff, he was like, hey, he's like, Scott, if we draft this guy, you're going to make sure that he does the right things, and he doesn't screw this up. I was like, Coach, just get him on our team. You know what I mean? Like, just get him here. And he came in and he hit the ground running, and obviously the rest is history with the Minnesota Miracle and all the different things he was able to do there. And then obviously in his career, and when he won I've seen him over the course of years, and he's always just so grateful to me. And he always says, how much, thanks for always believing in me, and and it means a lot. And I know he's had his issues, but he's a guy that I always root for, and I'm just really excited for him to go to the Super Bowl, especially just with what he's dealt with on the field, with going to different teams, hurting his knee, kind of people thinking that he was done, and to have the year he's had this year, and I'm happy for him, and I hope that he can finish it off.
And that's pretty wild. The first person to offer Stefon Diggs a scholarship was Scott Turner when he was at Pitt, and then he convinced Mike Zimmer and company at Minnesota to draft Stefon Diggs in the 5th round. I was having a conversation with a guy who's a friend of mine who was on Bob Malloy's staff at the time. We were having a conversation about the greatest high school football players. This is such a great basketball area, as you know, and has produced so many, phenomenal D1 and NBA players in hoops, but it's a good football area too. And I said to him, is Caleb Williams the best player to come out of this area? And he said, it's not even close. It's Diggs. And I said, really? Yeah. And he said, Diggs was literally uncheckable no matter where you put him on the football field as a high school football player.
Yeah, he was a phenomenal player. And that was his sophomore year. And then, his junior year, like, I remember my wife, my wife at the time, like, they always play those like games on ESPN2, like a week before like college football.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they were playing St. X in Cincinnati, and Diggs. And I remember like making her watch it. She's like, we have to watch a high school football game. We were dating at the time. I'm like, I got to watch this kid. And he was like unbelievable. I mean, he scored on defense. He had a sack, like he got a sack fumble, like big punt return, and they beat him. Good Counsel beat him, that big St. X, which is where, Luke Kuechly went. I'm not at that time, but, that's the high school he went to. And he, he was, unreal there. And yeah, he could do it all. Like I said, he really looked, he was a little leaner, but he looked about the same as he does now. And, yeah, he was a phenomenal high school football player.
Well, the other thing at Maryland, too, is he was a lethal returner. I mean, just, unbelievable. All right. Tell me about your dad and sister's podcast.
Okay, so it's called the Family Business with Norv and Stephanie Turner. It's on, it's on YouTube, and then if you want to watch it, and then it's on, any of the podcast services, Spotify, Apple, whatever. So, but it's good, and I think they've had I think I was the 19th episode. They've had guests,
You were the 19th episode.
Well, I was coaching all year.
They had to wait till after. Well, I know he had Cam on, and he had Thielen on. He's had some really good guests. Yeah.
Cam, Phillip Rivers, Troy Aikman. They got a lot of really good guests, and they, just talking about football, and some of it's stories from the past. Some of it's just talking about what's happening in the games. Like on the episode I was on, they're all about an hour, and like we talked about the playoff games, the championship games, and then we kind of talked about the Super Bowl a little bit. But yeah, it's good. It's really good, and just it's just kind of getting going. We're just trying to get some traction, and I put it on my Twitter page at Scott Turner, and just trying to see. I don't have a ton of followers. I have like 10,000, but just trying to see if I can get some more people drawn to it, and try to see if they can get some more viewers and listeners, because they do a really good job with it.
About your father, he's always been reluctant, I think, from afar. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your father's always been reluctant to talk about his time here, especially at the end after Snyder bought the team. Has he spent any time talking about the Washington teams, or is he still hesitant to do that?
They haven't talked much about it. I think they did. So they had Brad Johnson on, and he told a story about Dan going out and trying to kick field goals in his dress shoes after they had missed like a 35-yard field goal on the field. You got to watch it on the podcast to see it. It's in the Brad Johnson episode, because they do a better job telling it. But it's just a classic. It's a classic deal. And so he did talk about that a little bit. I had Trent Green on, so Trent really wasn't there for the Dan years.
Right.
The Brad Johnson one is where they really, they kind of talked about it, but not a ton. And I don't think he's as reluctant anymore. Especially now that Dan, doesn't own the team anymore.
Right.
And Dan, again, I know the issues. Obviously, he was part of the reason probably I got fired, but also he hired me, and I was able to, gave me a nice contract when I was there, and I worked there for 3 years. So it's not, and it's not to me, he wasn't all bad to me. You know what I mean? There were some decisions that were made that I'm talking about, just how he treated me. I know there's some other things, and I'm not defending him. I don't want anyone to think that. But he, there were some decisions that were made football wise, and it's unfortunately, it's too common in the league as far as people, making decisions for the wrong reasons, and all that does is spiral you in a bad direction, and I think, you got to have a plan, and you got to stick with it. And I think too many times they let the results dictate decision making, and I think that's where teams get in trouble. And it's not just a Dan Snyder problem, but he obviously had that problem.
Your dad in Oakland and San Diego, it was undefeated in his games against Washington. I'm assuming you know that, because it sounds like you've got a phenomenal memory of those days. But the game in 2005 was actually a devastating loss at FedEx when Oakland came in and beat us 16 to 10 or something like that. You knew that, right?
I knew we were undefeated, and then we were as a family, we were undefeated. And then in 2018, we came to, when we were in Carolina, we came to FedEx, and we lost. We got down 17-0. We came back, and we had a chance to throw the ball in the end zone at the end of the game to win, and we didn't. We got stopped on fourth down. But that was the first game that we had lost to Washington. And then obviously I went to work for Washington, so it was a different situation after that. But no, I was very, very well aware of that stat.
You just reminded me. I've just always been, and my listeners know this, the biggest Phillip Rivers fan. I think he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. And it was your father's team in which he went to Foxborough on a torn ACL and played in the AFC Championship game. After you guys had gone to Indy, I think it was Indy in the divisional round, and upset the Colts and Peyton Manning. And then he was on a torn ACL playing in that championship game, right?
Yeah, that was the 2007 season.
Yeah.
So those playoff games took place in 2008, but that was the undefeated Patriots team that ended up losing to the Giants in that week. But yeah, those were that was a hell of a run, because the Chargers hadn't won a playoff game since '94, and they beat the Titans at home and then upset Indy.
Yeah.
Darren Sproles had a phenomenal game in that game, and then like you said, Phillip played on the torn knee and weren't able to get it done. There was actually Mike Vrabel leg whipped Phillip, and he threw an interception to Asante Samuel in the fourth quarter, and then they were able to make it a 2-score game, but they didn't call the penalty. You know what I mean?
Right.
It was a clear as day. But again, we're not complaining about officials, so we're not going to.
Yeah. So, but I mean, your father probably has great
year.
Your dad, I'm sure, has great fondness for Phillip Rivers and vice versa.
Oh yeah, loves him. Shane Syke is one of my best friends. We played college football together, so Shane and Phillip. So that was so much fun to watch at the end of the year.
Oh my God, so much fun.
And it it was awesome. I mean, obviously they weren't able to win the games, but like they almost beat Seattle, who's in the freaking Super Bowl. The game, what was the game?
They had a
what
kick.
was the one game? And then they came out
San
firing
Francisco.
against San Francisco, but
Yep.
they just couldn't stop them on defense.
Oh.
But that, like, those first couple drives, watching that game in my office was like, I mean, that was as fun as it gets, on that one.
Well, this year it was interesting about this season. When Phillip Rivers came back, they almost beat Seattle on the road. They had a field goal. I wish they had just gotten a few more yards in that final drive, but whatever, because I was rooting so hard for him. But also this year, it just these masterful kind of veteran performances where they're in complete control. You saw it with Aaron Rodgers a couple of times this year. You saw it with Flacco a couple of times. That Thursday night game, you probably were preparing for your next game, but there was a game between the Steelers and Bengals this year on Thursday night that was just lights out quarterbacking with two guys in their 40s. It was unbelievable to watch.
Yeah, and it's hard to watch the Thursday night games during the season. The Monday night, because guys are kind of doing their own thing. That's the ones that you're able to watch a little bit more. But I do know what game we're talking about.
All right. I guess I'll end with this. Who do you like in the Super Bowl?
Like I said, I'm going to be rooting for Stephon. I just think the Seahawks are tough, as far as just offense, defense, special teams. I think the Patriots, are a really good team as well. And they've just been a little bit not quite as consistent offensively as Seattle, especially in the playoffs. Now, again, I'm going to say that I'll take with a grain of salt because the last 2 weeks they played the two best defenses in the NFL. So who you play has a little bit to do with that. But Seattle's very good on defense also. The Patriots, we played them twice this year, and like the second time we played them, they were so much better defensively than the first time, and then that just continued as it goes. I think it's going to be a close game. Like I said, I would love to see Stephon, and then I worked for Josh McDaniels in Vegas, and the way things ended there for him, he's a good friend, and I'd love to see him, go get another ring. I just think Seattle is probably a little bit too much for him. So again, with my heart, I'm going the Patriots, but with the way I see the game playing out, I think Seattle's going to get it done.
At Scott Turner on X, and Scott's father, Norv, and his sister's podcast is called The Family Business. So you can get that anywhere you get a podcast. The Family Business with Norv and Stephanie Turner. I'm sure it's a phenomenal listen, especially for the fan bases that had Norv in their town. And we had him here for many years in the 90s. I enjoyed this. Hope you're well, and let's do it again soon.
No, it was a lot of fun.
Scott Turner from my podcast last week. Interesting thoughts on May and Daniels and that Stephon Diggs story. Yeah, that's one of those questions. Some of you may have a better feel for the football, high school scene here and the greatest football players to ever come out of this area. Somebody texted me during it saying Randy White. Randy White did not play high school football in the DMV. He came from Pennsylvania to go to Maryland. But certainly Caleb Williams is probably in that conversation. But you talk to a lot of people and they'll say Stephon Diggs is one of the best high school football players they've ever watched. When we come back, let's do some Super Bowl trivia. 301-230-0980. This is a 15-year tradition where there are three questions. There is a fairly easy level trivia question on the Super Bowl, easy for those that know the Super Bowl. If you get that question right, you get to round two and you get, a difficult but a second level question. And if you get to level three, you get a very, very difficult question to answer. And if you get all three, you win a prize. Now, we're still trying to determine what that prize is. But it'll be tickets to something, or worst case, it'll be, perhaps if you're even interested, a chance to come in and sit in on a show with me one day. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. We had a winner last year. We had a winner the year before. I think we've had 4 all-time winners in the 15 or 16 years we've done this. 2 of them have been the last 2 years. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980 if you want to play some Super Bowl trivia. That's next. All right, we're playing some Super Bowl trivia. We'll try to do it a few times this week. 3 levels of questions, level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 3 is very difficult. In the, I think, 15 or 16 years we've done this, we've had 4 winners, including the last 2 years we've had winners. It's getting easier to do this because there's just much more information, including, some new ways to search quickly. You'll have 30 seconds for each question to get the answer, and then we will move on if you miss that answer. Let's start with Dave in Bowie. Dave, you ready to play some Super Bowl trivia?
I am.
All right, we'll start with a level 1 question. And the level 1 question is this: which team in the NFC East has the fewest Super Bowl wins? 30 seconds, go. Which team in the NFC East has the fewest Super Bowl wins?
Philadelphia Eagles.
That's good. That was pretty easy, I think. We'll start with that one being pretty easy. Let me just cross that one off the list so we don't use it anymore. All right, let's go to a level 2 question as we talk to Dave. Dave, where are you from?
Bowie.
Bowie. All right. Have you played this before with me? I think you have.
No.
No, you have not. All right. All right, here we go. Only 2 quarterbacks have ever started a Super Bowl as an undrafted free agent. Name them. 30 seconds. Go. 2 quarterbacks have started a Super Bowl as an undrafted free agent.
David Woodley and David Woodley and
10 seconds.
Let's give it to you.
You're wrong. David Woodley was actually drafted, but thanks. Yeah, I was waiting to see if he got one of the 2. Dave, thanks for your participation. But David Woodley, who started in Super Bowl 17 for the Miami Dolphins, which is one of those teams that had no business being in the Super Bowl with David Woodley at quarterback. Literally, he was with the Dolphins for 4 years after being drafted in the 8th round. Back then, the drafts were much longer. They were 12 rounds out of LSU, an 8th round pick, the 214th overall pick out of LSU. Not a bad guess, though, because he was certainly one of the worst quarterbacks to ever start a Super Bowl. Let's go to Cam in Largo. Cam, you ready to play some Super Bowl trivia?
For sure. I'm here. I'm ready.
All right. Let's start with something fairly easy when it comes to Super Bowl trivia. All right. Name the Super Bowl quarterbacks. Cam, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
What are we doing, Cam? Are you ordering from take? Are you in a fast food line?
No. I'm working right now, but I'm ready though.
Okay. Are you a Skins fan, Cam? I think you are, right?
For sure, I'm a Skins fan, 1,000%.
All right, I'll start with a Skins question. Name the NFL's MVP the year Washington went to its first Super Bowl. You have 30 seconds. Name the NFL's MVP the first year Washington went to a Super Bowl. 30 seconds for Cam in Largo to name the player who was the MVP in Washington's first season. It was not Riggo, but thanks for playing. We'll throw that one back into the hopper. That's a pretty good one, but if you're a Skins fan of a certain age, you should be able to get that because the MVP in Washington's first Super Bowl season, when they went to the Super Bowl for the first time, was actually a Washington Redskin player. Let's go to Joe, our guy Joe in Springfield. Joe's played Super Bowl trivia many times in the past. So let's get you started. I'm not going to give you a Skins first question here. I'm not going to give you a Washington.
I was about to say they're going to ask me a Skins question, but okay, I got you.
Yeah, it's been, I've probably given you a Washington question every single year.
You have.
I'll start with this.
All right.
Who was the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots the first time they were in a Super Bowl? You've got 30 seconds. Who was the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots the first time they were in a Super Bowl?
So it would have been against Chicago, but Kevin, this is way before my time on this one. I don't even know. I'm going to be drawing a blank on this one. I know it's against Chicago,
10
but
seconds,
I'm
Joe.
going to draw a blank.
Any name. Throw a name out there. Shoot. Shoot. 5.
Jeez. I'm drawing a blank.
2, 1. That's all right. You are correct. The first New England Super Bowl appearance was against those 85 Bears. And New England, by the way, in the game played 2 quarterbacks because their starter was absolutely ravaged by the Chicago defense in a Super Bowl that turned out to be 46-10. I thought when we had Aaron Schatz on earlier, the fact that the 85 Bears were not as good as the 86 Bears defense per DVOA, and the 91 Eagles are the number 1 defense in the history of football per the DVOA metric. I think the eye test would tell all of us that the 85 Bears, if you're of a certain age, was the greatest defense ever. Let's go to Matt in Germantown. Matt, you ready to play some Super Bowl trivia?
Yes, sir.
All right. Have you played before Super Bowl trivia?
Yeah, I played last year. I got the first 2 questions and missed the third one. So.
Uh-oh. All right. Let's get you into a very difficult first question here. Name the 4 coaches who have coached the 49ers in Super Bowls. 4 different coaches who have coached the 49ers in Super Bowls. Name them. You've got 30 seconds.
Bill Walsh, Seifert, Shanahan, and
got 3 of them.
Mariucci?
1 more. Who'd you say? Nope.
Mariucci?
10 more seconds.
Sorry.
Well,
that was your guess, right?
Yeah, that was my guess.
Yeah. All right.
Couldn't remember.
You can think it out loud, and we'll take you down to the buzzer, but it sounded like that was your guess. So I registered it as such. It was not Steve Mariucci. He did not coach the 49ers in a Super Bowl. Thank you. That was Matt in Germantown that we just talked to?
Was.
Okay, let's go to John, who's calling from Jacksonville. John, have you played Super Bowl trivia before?
I did several years ago. I wanted to touch base with you. We're the group when you talked to Jay Gruden, Jacksonville Beach Commanders Redskins fan club. So he hung out with us a few times. So several times.
And he's a good guy, right? Guy's guy for sure.
Oh, he's a great guy. Absolutely, absolutely.
Are you? So you're a Skins fan. So I'm going to hit you with this. Ready? Name the 4 Redskin kickers in their 5 Super Bowl games. You have 30 seconds. Name the 4 Redskin kickers in their 5 Super Bowl games. Go ahead.
Mark Mosley, Kurt Knight, Chip Lowmiller.
You got 3 of them.
Gosh.
There's 1 more.
15 seconds.
A blank.
10.
You can do it.
Ali Haji Sheik.
4,
No.
3, 2, 1.
I want to give you I want to give you the credit for it. You said it. You didn't declare it as part of your answer. but it was Ali Haji Sheik.
Oh,
man. He was the kicker in Super Bowl 22.
Oh, my gosh. Okay. I guess I didn't verbalize that strongly enough.
I'm going to give it to you. Let's get to – should we go to a ruling on that? What do you say, Max? Max is official on this.
I say we move on to the next round. Let's see what John's got.
Okay, John, here we go. Ali Haji Sheik.
Okay.
You got the look. Mosley is the one that kicked in 2 Super Bowls. Low Miller kicked in the 91 team Super Bowl. Obviously, Kurt Knight kicked in the very first Super Bowl, Super Bowl 7, and Ali Haji Sheik was the kicker in Super Bowl 22. All right.
Okay.
God, I think I've asked this question in previous years. It's a good one. Hold on. All right. Here we go.
Gonna lock in to ask his own questions.
All right. Because I know John's good. I can just sense that John's good.
John's
All right,
ready.
Here we go. Name the player with the longest Super Bowl drought between Super Bowl wins. You have 30 seconds. There's a player that had the longest amount of time drought between Super Bowl wins.
Oh, gosh.
15.
Oh, gosh. It's not coming.
5, 4,
Craig Morton?
3, 2.
No, but that's a good guess. But remember, he didn't win that Denver Super Bowl against the Cowboys.
That's right.
That he was in.
Lost to the Cowboys.
So it wasn't a great guess, but that would have been somebody that would have come to mind for me too. And by the way, he didn't win Super Bowl 5 against the Colts.
That's true. Lost the
right?
Colts. That's right.
Yeah. And so he lost both of those Super Bowls, but that was a long period of time between Super Bowls. I'm going to put that one back into the hopper because I think that is a hard one, but a good one. But thank you for playing. John in Jacksonville. Let's go to Sam. Is that Sam on hold?
Sam in West River.
We got Sam.
I'm
Sam,
here.
have you played Super Bowl trivia with us before?
I have not. Those last couple of questions were tough.
Okay. Are you a Skins fan?
I am a Skins fan. I'm 45.
Okay. Let's. All right, we'll go with a Skins first question here. Name the Redskin who had 2 interceptions in Super Bowl 26. You have 30 seconds. Name the Redskin who had 2 interceptions in Super Bowl 26.
Was it Mayhew?
No, sorry about that. He's an athletic director in town, although I actually don't know if he's an athletic director in town still. I don't think he is. Let's go to Samaj. Samaj, you ready to play some Super Bowl trivia?
Yeah, man. You lining them up. Good morning, guys.
I'm lining them up. I got a lot of them. After 2 straight years of winners, we had to toughen it up a little bit.
That's great for my first participation. But anyway, Go ahead. What's up, Matt? Thanks for taking my call.
All right, here we go. 2 teams share the record for the most Super Bowl losses. 2 teams share the record for the most Super Bowl losses. Name them.
Denver would be 1.
Correct.
Damn. It's got to be between Minnesota and Buffalo. Geez. But you said 2 teams.
2 teams.
Got to be somebody
15.
up there with Denver. Who's the
10.
famous for losing? Shit.
Come on, Smosh, throw one out. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Buff, Minnesota.
No.
Minnesota.
Nice try,
He
though.
said Buff, Minnesota.
Yeah, nice try though. That's not a real team, but I'll just give you a hint if I throw this question back in there. If anybody says either one of those two teams, the answer will be incorrect. All right.
Okay.
Thanks,
I
Samaj.
figured that part out.
Appreciate it.
You pushed me for an answer, so I had to give you one.
No,
Thanks,
yeah.
guys.
Yeah, you got creative. All right, we'll do this again tomorrow. Yeah, I definitely got after the round one questions this year. I'm not just letting anybody skate through to the final this year. You got to earn it. Got to earn it. All right. We'll do it again tomorrow. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, to team980.com. I do want to tell you about Window Nation's current deal. It is a good one. It's one of the best of the year, actually, if you're interested in new windows to kind of make your home look nicer and also save big on utility bills. I know we are in the midst of one of the coldest stretches of all time. This should be an eye-opener for many of you when you get your heating bill for January and the early portion of February, because it'll say something about your windows. And if they're 10 years of age or older, more likely than not, you need new windows. If you do, just give Window Nation the first shot. Give them a chance to come out and give you a free estimate. It's all I ask. They'll schedule it for you when it's convenient for you. They'll be in and out of your home in an hour or less. They'll actually tell you which windows should be replaced versus those that should not. If you decide to move forward with Window Nation, the deal is this. You get 4 free windows with every 4 purchased. You get an extra 10% off of that price because you are actually ordering those windows during the month of February, and that is a Valentine's Day discount. And then if you choose to finance the purchase, you don't have to pay anything for 2 years. No money down, no monthly payments, and no interest charged for 2 years. So by the time you start paying for these new windows in the year 2028, you will have already realized 2 full winters, 2 full summers of big savings on utility bills. Window Nation does it right. 96% of their installs require no follow-up service. Window Nation has 5-star reviews from over 45,000 people, and Forbes magazine ranked them number 1 among window installation companies in the United States. There's no risk to a free in-home estimate, and if you move forward, there's no risk because they offer a lifetime warranty on your purchase. 4 free windows with every 4 purchased, an extra 10% off for Valentine's Day, and you don't have to pay anything for 2 years. 866-90-NATION, windownation.com.
All right. Happy Tuesday, everybody. We start off with the New York Giants. They have hired Matt Nagy to fill their vacant offensive coordinator position. Former Washington offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury was also interviewed and considered a contender. However, the Giants opt to go with the man who worked closely with Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. Plus, last night, the Caps, they earned their 3rd win in a row. They take on the Philadelphia Flyers tonight, a big 4-1 win over the New York Islanders. And James Harden has requested a trade from the LA Clippers, reportedly leaving the organization shocked, weirdly enough. And tonight, the Wizards, they get rolling versus the New York Knicks. Again, that'll be right here on the Team 980. Coverage gets rolling at 6:45. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1. You catch programs like Take Command all off season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
I'm so amazed at how good our officials are. I mean, we spend time all week looking at various angles and still debating it a week later. These guys have to make a split-second decision. It's a difficult sport to officiate. It's fast. It's quick. And we have to be able to use technology, in my view, to try to prevent the obvious errors.
Roger Goodell yesterday during about a 40-minute State of the Union press conference during Super Bowl week took questions, and you heard him. He thinks the referees have done a great job. But what he's also implying is what was reported last week, and that is the NFL is discussing using more video replay to assess now penalties for violations related to player safety that are missed by officials and are currently not reviewable. Examples: face mask penalties, unnecessary roughness penalties, roughing the passer, hip drop tackles could be subject to replay review beginning next season. It's going to be brought up by the NFL Competition Committee. It's an off-season potential ad, vote, etc. But imagine, pick six, everybody's celebrating, no flags on the field. Wait a minute, we're getting New York weighing in on the missed face mask of a D lineman on an offensive lineman where he twisted it badly and they missed the call, and now we're going to flag it, and it's the offensive team's ball. There are 7 points, 6 points taken off the board for the defense and 15 yards added. I don't know, man. I think that there's a certain element of the game where, hey, they missed it. It's terrible that they missed it, but they missed it, and I don't like the drama after we've already had the drama of the play itself. So that's, that would be a significant change. Introducing many penalties that are missed as reviewable versus what they are now, which is non-reviewable. I already talked about, the 18-game comment that Goodell mentioned. I talked about it earlier in the show. He said it's not a given on the 18-game schedule. I personally would be very surprised if we get to the end of this decade and these aren't 18-game seasons in the NFL. I do think there should be increased roster sizes that go with it. But as I said earlier, the one thing that just sometimes you get people who don't understand the structure of the business relationship between players and teams, players and owners. The additional game adds significant new revenue, of which the players currently get 48.8% of said revenue. The owners get 51.2% of that revenue. The revenue goes up, everybody wins. With that said, the players have to think about things like safety, and the league needs to think about things like quality of the game with an extra week. And I think roster sizes would have to be addressed. The international schedule has advanced and grown even since the initial announcement of international games. Yesterday, Roger Goodell announced that they will be playing in Mexico City in 2026, and that right now there are 9 international games in 2026, up from 7 a year ago. Those 9 include the first ever game in Paris. As we discussed yesterday, it was reported that the Saints will host the Browns. The only thing the NFL confirmed is the Saints will be the host in that game. There's a game in Melbourne, Australia. Can't imagine that won't be 2 West Coast teams. Then you get this Mexico City game for the first time in a while. By the way, that's a game scheduled for December next year. Madrid, Rio, so back to Brazil, Munich, and 3 more games in London. Washington is, the reporting, Nikki Javala had this about a month ago. Washington will be hosting using one of their home games to host an international game for the second consecutive year. Last year, they were the road team against Miami in the game in Madrid. I would certainly think that Australia's out. We know that Paris is out. So that leaves Madrid again. I would think we're out for Madrid since we played there last year. So it's Brazil, Mexico City, Munich, or one of the 3 games in London for Washington next year. Yeah. So we'll see how that plays out. But 9 weekends next year of international football. Now, the Mexico City and Rio games will be night games. The Australia game will be, they are what? What's the difference? That's a 9-hour difference. They're 9 hours ahead of us, I believe. So that could be a morning game, just like the Australian Open tennis. We get it, 3:30 in the morning. So that could be, a night game in Australia, but a morning game in the U.S. So I love Sunday morning football, and it looks like we'll have it at least 7 Sundays next year with night games in Rio and in Mexico City is my guess. Chris Russell's next.